going to see the end result and application and output of the theories learned so far in retail stores. First, we're taking a walk on streets to see the visual merchandising in standalone stores of Chennai. The first store that we came to is Louis Philippe on Kader Nawaz Khan Road, Chennai. You can see here when we zoom in to the Louis Philippe window that it has been inspired from the history. So how important is history to understand while making the store? There are historical columns and there are tables which have been taken from the olden era. It is a corporate brand and the whole display has a look of corporate, hence the window looks very corporate. The white color adds to the corporate feel. Material that has been used to make the props for display. So all the knowledge of the theories that we discussed about previously have been employed into this window. Let's move on to our next store. Oh, we had a zoomed window here. We should show one shot. So next store is Van Heusen. You can see this is an interesting thing, as Louis Philippe as well as Van Heusen, both of them are closed back windows. That is, you cannot see the rest of the store through the window. And here too we have a plain black backdrop against which the mannequin has been placed. But as we can see here that there is lesser money that has been spent in making of the window, hence the props here are much lesser vis-a-vis Louis Philippe, which is a more costlier brand. But something interesting about Van Heusen are the light boxes which are hanging outside the store, which probably would be an interesting feature while captured in the night, and it's a nice way, since visual merchandising is silent selling, it would catch people from the streets and bring into your store. And you can see here the whole facade of the store is very different. This is what I was saying, when we do walk across streets and we have independent stores, they make them very different from what you see in the malls. That you can play also with the facade and literally picking up people from the street and making them walk into your stores. As you can see that they have advertised it's for suits and blazers, But the most interesting feature of this store is the way they have displayed their jeans. This is a two-storied floor, so you can see an interesting display of mannequins also on the upper level. As we were walking down the street, we found Park Avenue store, which was on a race level. Now, one thing interesting is when you're not on the level of your customer, then you need to make your store even more exciting so that the customer walks into your store. Coming to Park Avenue, the symbol itself is quite exciting and inviting. But this is an interesting open back window. One of the reasons probably would have been of keeping an open back window that a customer when he is walking on the street can get a peekaboo of the items that are on display inside the store, which might lure him to walk into the store. Further down the street, we had Adidas. And Adidas, as you know, is a sports brand. Look at the mannequin. What an interesting mannequin. It shows a person in action, running. That's what the shoes stand for. And if you can see, there's a yoga mat right next to. So it all symbolizes sporty and the brand, as well as the window is showing exactly that and conveying it to the customers. A very interesting display of the mannequin in the front, which is very exciting for a passerby to stop and walk into the store. This is an interesting store of Nike, generally known as a brand of an upmarket sportswear brand. When you look at it, you get none of that feel through it, except for the merchandise which is inside. The exterior is totally uninviting. Probably the cost spent on the windows has been very, very minimal, with just a poster displaying the shoe. So there is no actual display of the merchandise also on the window, which was a very disappointing. So one of the examples of what you should not do in VM. Tailorman. As we were crossing by, the shop struck us and made us stop and come by and look at the window. It had interesting mannequins and an interesting display. The name itself was very inviting, dark and different, and there was a strong contrast of the logo to the background. As we zoom in further, what an interesting window. Can you see the tag there which is reading just married? And look at the stand behind. And as we proceeded further, we came to zodiac. What catches your eye is the way the font has been used, the logo has been used against the background. How beautifully they have used the circular niche that was there in the building to the advantage for the store. Another interesting feature is, if you can see, you have the Tamil names which have been written. This is very interesting, whereas in other cities you would not find the local language being written on this along with the store name. What caught our eye next were these beautiful mannequins like robots in the display. This was Raymond's, just expressing what they do. You can see the sewing machine also out there. Very, very expressive and interesting display feature. Next to it was another interesting feature of the art store. Beautifully done sculptures with a beautiful backdrop which also caught our eye. Even if it is not an art shop, but the backdrop is so interesting that one could think of using the same in any of your window designs to go with your theme when you're designing a window. Then we move further down to Studio Pepper Fry. As you all know, Pepper Fry is for ready-made furniture, and as the name indicates, beautifully done furniture. There's not much to see from the exterior out here due to all the reflections of the glasses, but we will see better images of it later when we come over to the mall and have a look of the mall. Then we moved further and we came to Studio Pepper Fry. Pepper Fry, as you know, is a furniture store which deals with ready-made furniture. Very interesting store. Look at the interior, so beautifully done. So many characters and so many features that one could just pick up elements from this and use them for the stores or for the residences straight away from here. Beautiful suggestive ideas. And the logo of the company is equally interesting. Interesting, Lawrence and Mayo boutique with a Burberry window. Please look at the beautiful cutout which has been done. This is an interesting feature and element which can be used in VM, especially when you do not have that amount of money to have the original props done as well as keep the merchandise on the window. So you could work, this is a cheaper version, although the Burberry brand does not signify being cheap. The norm of Indian design today is having glass and steel facade. When we talk of eco-friendly architecture and design, we need to think, do we really need it? We've been aping the West, but not really realizing whether we need it or we don't need it. They look beautiful, but how much of energy are we wasting in cooling down these spaces? The West dies for sunlight. India is full of sunlight. We die for power. So wasting power in cooling down these spaces is not the solution. A beautiful shape, probably when it was built by an architect, would have been interesting form. But look at the building. Absolutely no maintenance. It looks like a dilapidated building which can fall off any day, any time. This should never be done in VM. This shot has been taken primarily to look at the jali work. We'd been talking about play of light and shade, play of jalis, play of laser cutting, but this has been made in concrete. Interestingly, on the facade, a whole jali work which is very modernistic, unlike the historical Rajasthani jalis. Beautiful modern version of laser cutting. And as we move further, we came to Sterling Road. And what struck our eye was Sterling Music. Sterling Music Studio is beautifully done up. It's not just they are selling guitars or any of those drums and any of those musical instruments, but the instruments have been put on display so beautifully that they excite you to walk in and have a look of the store even if you're not buying them. That is VM. As we moved further down, we came to Ananagar, and the first store that we hit on was Arvind. Arvind being a mass brand, you can see over here. As we move further down, we came to Ananagar, and what we first hit on was Arvind store. Arvind is a huge umbrella with all the brands, US Polo, Flying Machine, Arrow, Basics, under it, one roof. So you can see an assorted and a variety kind of display out here. Since Arvind is a brand which manufactures fabrics, and from fabric to garments, you can see the measuring tape and the scissors being used as an element on the window, which is another interesting feature to represent the brand. The whole idea of standing at Handloom World was not what we saw below, but what we saw above. You can see beautifully done laser cut facade, which is very interesting and exciting, which excited us to come to the space. So laser cutting can be used not only on interiors but on exteriors, which might not be laser cutting. It could be router cutting of the design, or they could be made in concrete, or they could be done in metal. And our next store or a stopover was at Fab India. When you look down, you wonder where the store is. Of course, if you look at the facade, beautifully done up and inviting. But when you look and raise your eyes up, you see beautifully coordinated windows with all the merchandise that Fab India sells. Simple, elegant, yet attractive. That is Fab India. And our next store or a stopover was at Fab India. When you look down, you wonder where the store is. Of course, if you look at the facade, beautifully done up and inviting. But when you look and raise your eyes up, you see beautifully coordinated windows with all the merchandise that Fab India sells. Simple, elegant, yet attractive. That is Fab India. Not very impressive stores out here, yet the black facade was inviting and the stark red against it. The interesting feature is the wall that you see, which was almost on the road with the symbol of Levi's. During the night, it would be a very attractive board or a signage attracting people from the street into the store. But another thing which is a sure no-no for a window or a facade is the way you see those lights which have been strung, which might light up in the night but would not make an appealing facade. Instead, if they had just used LED lights on the sides of that particular poster which is out there, that would make it more interesting. What was very minimal in Levi's has been more accentuated in Lee and Wrangler. You can see the lights dangling throughout the store, which looks very tacky. Instead, they could have run LEDs on the sides, which would have made it more interesting and more professional. Our next stop was at US Polo, and as it says Polo, you can see the polo balls out there made in pine wood. A very interesting way of doing a window display. The display itself speaks for the brand and the kind of clothes that you would find inside. Our next stop was at Kalaniketan. It's a local brand, and don't miss the entrance. Although it's a stark, distinct feature vis-a-vis the background, which is very, very Western, the facade has got a Chettinad style, which is very interesting for a brand like Kalaniketan. Tanishq has been using laser cutting for, I think it must be one of the first brands who started with laser cutting on its facade, on its packaging, on its interiors too. They even used laser cutting on their windows with 3M sheets, where you would have laser cut patterns done on the 3M sheet, which would be ripped off and used on the windows as designs. This is a beautiful way of representing the laser cutting style on the facade. Wildcraft, as you know, is a very rugged and rough and tough brand. And the interiors also, which being an open window, are visible. And when you look at the ceiling or you look at the focal point, which is the backdrop and the last wall of the store, you can see that ruggedness throughout the whole display. And then we moved over to another of a local store, which was Diva. The interesting feature of the store was its location, that it was a corner building, so they got two sides for display. As you walk through, Please notice these features. The toughened glass as you enter hits you, which takes you upstairs. The laser cut element framing the store, the display systems or the display racks is another interesting feature. The wooden roof panel that you would see where the lights are inserted is another interesting feature. The tables and the chairs have been done in a manner which go with the ambience. Next, what hits you as you move towards the staircase is a blank wall which has a huge frame over which there is a floral decor. The top is almost similar to the bottom in terms of display, except that the laser cutting design here are different in the upper floor. The lower ones imitate the logo, but the upper ones do not frame the shells as you see in the lower one, and they form a nice display system over which the garment is put on display. There is an interesting chandelier with a false ceiling, and it looks as though it's a floating water falling from the ceiling. What you see here are examples of windows. So kindly look at each of these windows and look at all the elements and the way they have been put on display. High Style has been designed on the lines of Central. After walking through the street, and now we come to a format which is a seamless format store, High Style. All brands are under one roof with no walls separating them. Another interesting feature in High Style is the glass trial room in the ground floor. The ground floor is in focus for women, mainly dealing with saris, cosmetics, dress materials and few accessories. The first floor focuses on women on one side with ethnic and western, and for kids on the other side. The second floor focuses on men, casual and sportswear on one side and the western on the other. That's it. Now these are some examples of fixtures that you see inside the stores. This is an interesting element because you need to know how are you going to display your various, if it's a shirt, how would you display, if it's a trouser, how would you display, if it's a dress, how would you display, if it's a gown, how would you display. So there are different kinds of fixtures for different kinds of apparel merchandise, as well as if it's a footwear, the display rack would be very different. So the fixtures change based on what is the merchandise put on display. Examples of corner display, uh, how you can make an interest. So when you walk into a store, it's not always only the window which is attracting. Once you've attracted your customer on the window, you also need to retain the customer inside your store so that the footfall turns into sales. And that's where you need to create a lot of focal points, you need to create a lot of corner window, or you need to create a central wall, or you need to create an island display. So these are some of the examples of them. What we see here are interesting displays for men apparel, women apparel, kids apparel, shoes, watches, eyewears, accessories, and so on. These are all done. Awesome. After the streets, we walk into malls, and the first mall that we hit was Phoenix Mall. An interesting feature was a building ahead of Phoenix. The way they have recycled and used waste products and created sculptures and installations out of it is very interesting. Phoenix, in fact, whether it is Chennai, whether it's Bangalore or any other place, you would see very good installations in Phoenix. It is in fact one of the best malls to be in if you're trying to be a student of visual merchandising and looking at the latest trends in the Indian market. Urban Eagle had a beautiful mechanical kind of a display, which is very, very interesting. So you can see that in VM, you need to know about themes, pick up themes and work around the themes. And of course, those themes should go what your brand stands for. Say for example, if we are working for urban yoga, I cannot use pulleys into my exterior of my store to represent the store or to do a window. HomeStop has another interesting feature on its window. There are two very, very interesting elements. One, you can see an arm. One, you can see a palm out there, and it's an interactive window. If you go and place your palm out there, if you see those likes, the number would change. Currently you see 42874. The moment you put your arm, it will be 42875. Another interesting element is the way the mannequin has been made to sit on the sleek metal pipes which are lit. Another interesting feature of the window is the way the mannequin has been placed between the two lit LED pipes, and it looks as though she's sitting on those pipes. The other window of HomeStop is very, very homely. So you can see what a contrast. One is very, very Western and modern, and the other is very, very homely, because that's what HomeStop stands for. So you can see all the merchandise that they sell is out on display over here. All the ranges of merchandise with props beautifully arranged with a fireplace, and a whole setting of a living room has been done out here. Raymond has been interestingly making its display very, very interesting. As we'd seen in the last time also, there was a tape and a scissor which was just a graphic print, but here they have spent the money to have the actual tape, a pair of scissors, you see the marker, you see the bobbin. All that goes behind tailoring a garment. Wonderfully represented in the window. Another interesting feature is the way the belts have been displayed in the Raymond's window. A beautiful prop for display of belts. So you can see here a very interesting display of Raymond stores windows. Do not miss the interesting way of representing the brand. You can see the spinning wheel in the Color Plus store, and the output is a garment on the mannequin in front of it. A very neat way of displaying beautifully color-coded spinning wheels. An interesting display of the corner of US Polo, and you can see that not only at the entrance but also inside the store you can have interesting prop elements. We talked of when we were talking about independent stores in the street of this fixture before. Here again at the Phoenix Mall, we can see how the jeans has been displayed, giving it a rough and tough background, a beautifully done arrow jeans display. As you move to the upper floor, you can see One Friday, and on One Friday you see the way it's a kidswear brand, beautifully done. And you see a lot of elements which are of interest for the kids, like a tree behind. You feel as though you could hang around the tree and play around. You can also see a rack which has been suspended from the ceiling. So it represents a kind of jhula in olden days, which children used to play outside, which today is quite a missing thing. Another interesting feature in the same store is a representation of the bunk bed. What we would have all done as kids, wanting to be on the upper bed. Interestingly, what you see behind is a mother towing the kid around in the pram. The Sawa Siddhi traditional Thai spa had beautiful, interesting, jali kind of work at the entrance. So you can see what you learn as your basics in visual merchandising, how they are applied onto stores. In Chennai's Phoenix Mall, a lot of stores have used this kind of a jali work, which is not so prevalent in Bangalore Phoenix. Another interesting stopover was at RMKV Silks. It's again an Indian native brand, and since they weave their own saris, you can see a weaving loom incorporated inside the display. The store had interesting display systems, and all that you've learnt about material, the wood has been used extensively, as well as glass walls have been used extensively. There are certain display systems which are showing the traditional style of display. As we'd seen in Diva, we had chandeliers dropping down from the roof, giving it an effect of falling water, the same way you have in this, a very modernistic way of display of the chandeliers falling off from the roof. Beautifully done lighting. What's interesting about the Jashn's window display is cupids everywhere, and you can see the hearts with the arrows, few of them focusing to the center, rest of them all around. Soch is again an Indian brand. You can see in the display that you have cut motifs which have been used on the facade, as well as you have a moving video window which is very futuristic, as you would find similar kind of displays in high streets in Paris, where you have the ramp walks and the fashion shows and the fashion weeks being projected out on each of the branded stores like Christian Dior, etc. Raymond, as always, had something interesting in their displays. Here you can see a beautiful lampshade, and when you look from a distance, it looks like some cityscape. The other window had a beautiful arrangement of shirts with cutlery in between. Brooks Brother had a beautiful feature, an animal which was displayed using modular kind of a fixture system. So if you want to carry everything together, all you need to do is pick up all these blocks, disassemble them, put them in a box, and they become so thin to carry wherever you want. This modular concept of display or being used as a prop is another important element which can be used in the windows. This is an interesting window on Zara Women. It looks as though you have stars coming down to earth. But if you go closer, you realize that they are not actually cutouts with lights behind, but they are a holographic, three-dimensional projection. which is being shown in the sample here. An interesting display of fossil watches. If you see that prop, which is very interesting, it looks like a hand on which the watch has been placed. And that's what you do. The watch is on your arm. Interesting feature are the way the backdrops have been done for the bags in the brand Calonge. The whole matte weave kind of a backdrop is very interesting, which you can see through all the windows, and you have different patterns on each window. So you show all three. High Design is an up-end Indian brand, and you can see a beautiful way, the way they have done the display of their bags. The store really looks luxury, as are their products. What strikes you is the sheer signboard of Gap. Signages are another important element of visual merchandising. Your interesting signages would capture the people on the street into your stores. And of course, what you see in the background is a beautifully done Gap Kids display. As you'd seen on the streets where we had captured Pepper Fry, the same interest has been brought on even in the Phoenix. Beautifully done interiors of Pepper Fry. With the Christmas nearing, Marks and Spencer's brings us closer to the Christmas display. Beautifully done Christmas display on the windows, and interestingly we could see a lot of people flocking there to click photographs against the snow. Van Heusen had another interesting element, the way they had done the box slide. The sheer form of it actually was just plain, but by creating that vision or illusion, it looked as though it was 3D and it was coming out like a prism. But when you look at a closer detail of Van Heusen's prop, which is in the center, you would notice some edges coming off, which is not a good sign in maintenance of your display. Swarovski, although the shop was closed down, but the exterior excited us with the way the diamonds or the crystals of Swarovski have been shown on the exterior. Forest Essentials had again beautiful jali kind of laser cutting done on wood, behind which you had colored lights, and they created a beautiful impact and attracted customers to this store. Accessories, as you know that the brand stands for accessories and it has a lot of bling, so is the window. And what is interesting was that the window of accessories is the same as the window of accessories in Bangalore. So irrespective of where you're doing the store, which is a chain, same features get carried whether it is Chennai, Bangalore, Delhi or Bombay. This window has an interesting lighting, and the way the focus has been on the merchandise. On one side you can see the bags and on the other side you can see the shoe. Perfect focal point has been created, not only with the lighting, also with the strips that are on the sides. Tommy Hilfiger had an interesting feature like a rope, which was in acrylic in the front, and it was very exciting and invited people to walk into their stores. As we discussed earlier, VM is not just in the stores but also in the eateries, restaurants, bars, pubs and so on. So you can see here, this is Hagen-Boss, the eatery joint with beautiful lighting systems which look like stick ice creams, and they are basically the lighting system for the store. In the Pramod's storefront, you can see a beautiful play of geometry. The backdrop that is there is a very Islamic geometric pattern that has been created, and the same elements have been taken out and recreated in the three-dimensional form and hung from the ceiling. Diesel again represented Christmas, snow and winter, beautifully done up elements from the West. Gant is a brand which always takes its inspiration from garden. A couple of years back, a store in the Phoenix had a fence of the garden with creepers on it, and today here in Chennai's store you can see that as a backdrop you have the garden elements out there on the window. Charles & Keith had an interesting window display where you can see how the material has been manipulated. They have an acrylic sheet which has been bent, heat pressed and bent in different fashions to display different products. You can see how the bag is being held by a different form and the shoe has been held by different forms. So that was a very, very interesting feature on Charles & Keith window. MAC, as you know, the brand stands very chic, very high-end cosmetic brand, and all in black. Very neatly arranged and organized. That's the beauty of MAC. It's clean, it's simple, it's elegant. Here, as you can see on the gas store, you have fall winter collection, and you can actually feel the autumn leaves fallen down on which somebody is walking. Beautiful representation of the West. What I want to focus here is the way these posters have been hung on fishnets from the top, and this is the same way they have been done across even on Bangalore stores. So you can see that brands have a common display system irrespective of where they are, unless they are in B or C grade cities. Max has been experimenting a lot these days with its window displays and keeps coming up with something very, very interesting. Today we all live in the techno world, and Max caters to the younger generation, fast moving, cheap and designer clothes which are affordable to them, and hence it's showing those dialogue boxes which are very, very interesting to be read. This was an interesting toy shop. The tree is beautifully made out of ropes, and everything looks so homely and so convenient that a child would love to be here to pick up his toys. Flying machines exterior again was very, very interesting. The laser cutting is what struck us, and that's what made us come closer to the store and look at it. Here in Indian Terrain, the whole idea of taking this was not so that the window was very interesting, but the way the window had been blocked partially, and there was a peekaboo which was given which would create an interest for a customer to look into the stores. So this is another interesting feature which one can take to use for their stores. And then came Lee and Wrangler. In Lee, what was interesting was the way the logo was cut out and kept on the bottom. And what you see over here in Wrangler is the sheer graphics which are talking of traveler jeans. If you zoom in, you can see an interesting pattern created out there. What we were talking about, cutouts or rather laser cutting on 3M sheets which could be ripped off and stuck onto the glasses and create those patterns. You see an example here in Just Watches where 3M sheets have been used behind with the laser cutting pattern created on them. Ed Hardy, as the brand stands for, you can see the skull out there because they have the same skull patterns on a lot of their garments, so which has been out there on the shop, and an interesting framework running all around in steel. A very very interesting feature of a headphone zone, so beautifully done as at the entrance. It looks as though you're walking into a headphone store, so even if you hardly or barely see their logo, but the store itself speaks for itself. Nike shoe has got beautiful way of display. The way they display their shoes is what was interesting, and this is how you could think of having simple props on which a shoe could be on display. Reebok once again is talking of a sporty brand, and when you look at the mannequin you really realize that he's running. And what is another interesting is the way they have got a series of those trapeziums one after the other, which is very very interesting in the facade. Adidas, as you know, is not a high-end brand, but the way they did their display with less money but beautifully done. If you see, there is a cutout of shoes, and behind those shoes you have LED lights which backlit it, and it gives a beautiful effect as though a real enlarged shoe is kept out there. Puma had interesting ways of display on their storefront, which you can see the props that you've used are very very interesting. Again, in the Peter England store, what was very interesting was the way they had given the texture to the backdrop wall, and it looks as though the person is just coming out of his house and he's wearing the suit of Peter England. And if you can see, what is written over in the front is a wedding collection. So, and the motifs that you have on the lower side are very very ethnic patterns. Sting is not so famous, not so known brand, but a beautifully done window, which was very exciting, very rugged kind of a feeling in the front, and beautiful pop of colors at the backdrop. Big Bazaar, as you all know, it's a mass brand, but beautifully done window display where you're seeing a city at the backdrop, and you have a very very western garments in the forefront. Globus again talks of a interesting backdrop. If you see the kind of geometry that has been used at the backdrop. So another important element that you should know is that your backdrops, when you have closed back windows, can be made very very interesting based on the patterns that you create. Steve Madden has a very very rustic kind of a display, although it's a very very high-end footwear, but a beautiful way of display, very rugged and very nice and very traditional kind of furniture that you see. A lot of wood is always used in Steve Madden's display.